In the glittering world of Hollywood's golden age, no man shined brighter than Rock Hudson, the ultimate symbol of charm, masculinity, and desire. But behind the perfect smile and blockbuster roles, he carried a truth that would have destroyed his career if it had ever come out. In his final days, Hudson revealed the shocking reality of the secret romances he shared with other Hollywood legends, men whose names the world never suspected. For decades, these affairs were buried under layers of lies, contracts, and carefully crafted images. But when Rock finally spoke, he shattered the illusion and changed the way we see Hollywood forever. Rock Hudson was the perfect Hollywood man, or so the world believed. Behind the dazzling smile and heartthrob image was a secret life, one he shared only with a select few actors he trusted the most. To the public, he was untouchable, the ultimate leading man. But to those closest to him, Hudson's story was one of hidden truths and carefully constructed illusions. His journey to stardom began far from the glitz of Hollywood, in the small town of Winnetka, Illinois, where he was born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in 1925. After serving in the Navy during World War II, Hudson returned home with big dreams and little direction. He moved to California, taking on odd jobs to survive while chasing the hope of a film career. At first, it seemed impossible. He had almost no acting experience and struggled to even land auditions. But fate intervened when he crossed paths with Henry Wilson, a powerful and controversial Hollywood agent. Wilson had a talent for transforming handsome young men into bankable stars, and under his guidance, Roy Scherer was reborn as Rock Hudson. It was the beginning of a rise to fame that would make him one of the most recognizable faces of the silver screen, while forcing him to guard the deepest secret of his life. In the late 1940s, Henry Wilson officially transformed Roy Harold Scherer Jr. into the man the world would soon idolize, Rock Hudson. With a new name and a carefully crafted image, Hudson became the perfect leading man Hollywood desperately wanted. But in those days, the studios held all the power. They dictated not only an actor's career but often their personal lives as well, deciding how they looked, who they dated, and what the public was allowed to know. Universal Pictures wasted no time in shaping Hudson into a star, flooding fan magazines and newspapers with his photos, painting him as the ultimate American dream. At first, Hudson's on-screen presence was small, bit parts and background roles in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Yet the studio kept pushing him forward, certain he had the makings of a box-office sensation. Their gamble paid off. By the mid-1950s, Rock Hudson was no longer just another actor struggling for screen time. He was headlining major films like Magnificent Obsession and Giant, standing shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's greatest. Audiences couldn't get enough of him. His charm, his looks, his presence, it all seemed effortless. And by the early 1960s, Hudson had risen to the very top, becoming the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. To the world, he had it all. But behind the carefully polished image, Rock Hudson was living a life far different from the one the studio sold to millions. Even though his career was taking off, Hollywood at the time was unwilling to acknowledge the truth. Rock Hudson was gay. The American film industry was overtly anti-homosexual in the 1950s and 1960s. A celebrity's career may end nearly immediately if their sexual orientation were made public. According to studio officials, viewers like their starring men to be macho and have romantic feelings for women. Ticket sales were thought to be at risk from anything that didn't suit that picture. Public rumors weren't the only danger. Magazines that focused on publishing scandals involving celebrities included Confidential. Unless an agreement was reached to prevent them, they would disclose information about a celebrity's private life if they found it to be inconsistent with their public persona. Additionally, there was always the chance of being blacklisted. Studios might not hire an actor if they suspect them of being gay. To show the world that they were straight, some actors felt compelled to date or even marry women. Insiders sometimes referred to this as studio fixing, putting together cover stories, relationships, or events to safeguard an actor's reputation. The cover-up of the marriage. In the 1940s and 1950s, Henry Wilson was one of Hollywood's most influential talent agents. He was an extremely specialized person. In an era when the public would never have accepted it, he managed attractive young male actors, many of whom were gay or bisexual. Wilson was aware of how the Hollywood industry operated and the potential consequences if a star's personal life didn't align with the image the studios were trying to promote. He was renowned for influencing every aspect of his clients' lives, including their names, attire, and the jobs they performed. Rock Hudson was just another struggling actor when he signed with Wilson. Wilson started transforming him into the type of man the public would view as the ideal romantic lead and gave him the new moniker Rock Hudson. He cast him in parts that emphasized his height, voice, and sharp appearance. By setting up interviews for periodicals, he portrayed Hudson as a kind, grounded man who was well-liked by women. People were unaware that Wilson was also closely monitoring Hudson's private life in order to conceal his sexual orientation. In 1955, Hudson's career faced its greatest danger. The infamous gossip magazine Confidential magazine claimed to have knowledge on Hudson's sexual orientation. Confidential was known for publishing shocking articles on the personal lives of celebrities, and its reports had the potential to ruin careers right away. In the 1950s, being publicly identified as gay would have been disastrous for a prominent figure like Hudson. Henry Wilson realized he needed to move quickly. He made contact with Confidential and started to negotiate. He came up with a startling solution. He would provide them with negative information about actor Rory Calhoun, another client of his, rather than allowing them to run the Hudson story. As a youngster, Calhoun had a history of arrests that had never been made public. In return for suppressing the Hudson piece, Wilson vowed to keep this tale discreet. The publication concurred. Wilson had given up one client to save another, but Hudson's name was not in the news. The threat persisted even after the initial crisis was averted. There were still rumors going around Hollywood and among gossip columnists regarding Hudson's personal life. Wilson concluded that staging a marriage was the best approach to end such allegations. Phyllis Gates, who was actually his own secretary, was the lady he selected. Gates was smart, handsome, and already acquainted with the society Hudson had entered. It was a hastily arranged marriage. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates were married in Santa Barbara, California, on November 9, 1955. In order to make the appropriate impression on the press without attracting too much notice, the ceremony was modest and meticulously organized. Confidential had been getting ready to publish the Hudson story just a few days prior. Therefore, the wedding's timing was not coincidental. The public saw a fresh headline as a result. The attractive celebrity had settled down and found love. The marriage appeared to be a traditional Hollywood romance in public. Pictures of the duo grinning together were published in fan magazines. Hudson was portrayed in interviews as a contented bride. The image was just what Henry Wilson was looking for. In private, however, the truth was far more nuanced. The marriage did not alter Hudson's sexual orientation. And the public's perception of his and Gates' relationship was never one of intense affection. Phyllis Gates released a memoir called My Husband Rock Hudson years later. She stated in it that when they got married, she was unaware that Hudson was gay. She claimed that she thought their connection was genuine and was taken aback when she started to hear stories. Some who knew the pair, though, have questioned whether Gates really was unaware. Many have argued that she must have at least suspected the truth because she worked in Wilson's office and was aware of how Hollywood operated. Others speculate that because of the social and financial advantages the marriage offered her, she might have decided not to recognize it at the time. Garlington, Lee. When Lee Garlington and Rock Hudson first met in 1962, it was a very unusual encounter. At the time, as a young movie extra, Garlington was attempting to establish himself in Hollywood. He had heard tales about Hudson's personal life that didn't align with the idealized portrayal of a leading guy on movie posters. Inquisitive and eager to catch a sight of the star, Garlington made the decision to position himself in a position where he would unintentionally run into him. On the lot of Universal Studios, outside Hudson's bungalow. Garlington pretended to read a copy of Variety, the trade journal for the industry. Then it took place. Tall and broad and dressed like a movie star, Hudson strode out. He was a formidable figure. Later, Garlington would remember that he was 6 feet 4 inches and a monster. Hudson took one look back and continued walking down the street. That was it. Garlington remembered the occasion, but no words were spoken. Their paths intersected once more a year later, but in a completely different situation. When Hudson's acquaintance reached out to Garlington to set up a meeting, Garlington had just broken up with someone else. In order to preserve the seclusion that both guys required at the time, the friend served as a mediator. Their introduction resulted in something more this time. At Hudson's residence on Beverly Crest Drive in Beverly Hills, they had their first actual meeting. Garlington felt uneasy. He found him unexpectedly pleasant in person, despite the fact that Hudson's physical stature and fame were daunting. They sat together when Hudson offered him a beverage. Later, Garlington acknowledged that the first night was a bust. He was too terrified to move. However, it was the start of a modest romance that would develop gradually. Always taking care to keep their romance out of the public eye, the two saw each other in private. They mostly met at Hudson's house on Beverly Crest Drive. They could spend time together on this opulent residence without having to worry about being spotted by cameras or gossip reporters. Privacy was crucial. One of the top movie stars in the world had a gay relationship in the 1960s that could have destroyed both men's reputations and careers. They were still at risk even with their prudence. In one terrifying instance, a female admirer broke into Hudson's house when he and Gar were abroad. She slept on Hudson's bed in addition to entering the residence. Hudson was really disturbed when they got back and found out about the intrusion. He installed new gates and other security measures around the house as a result of the incident to keep unwanted visitors out. Living a double life also contributed to the ongoing undertone of suspicion. Vito Russo, historian and LGBTQ activist, later discussed the necessity of secrecy. Regarding Hudson's connections, Russo clarified that gay performers such as Hudson and Garlington were part of a Hollywood system that was based on power and quiet. Any deviation from the carefully cultivated public image that stars were expected to project was viewed as a danger to their careers as well as the studio's revenues. This implied that Hudson and Garlington's relationship would never be able to be made public. Despite the fact that it held significance for them both. Garlington gradually moved on from his relationship with Hudson as the years passed. He moved away from Hollywood and started a new life. He worked as a stockbroker before falling in love with Paul Garrington. The couple resided in Queenstown, New Zealand, after getting married in April 2014. Far from the Hollywood limelight that had influenced so much of Garlington's early adult life, he spent his senior years there. Prostate cancer and internal bleeding issues caused Lee Garlington to die on December 6, 2023, at the age of 85. He had seldom discussed his relationship with Hudson in depth in the decades that had passed since their time together. But when he discovered one thing, it really affected him. That in a biography written after Hudson's passing, Rock Hudson had called him his real love. Jack Coates. The path that led Jack Coates to Rock Hudson's side started far from the glitz and glamour of Beverly Hills. Coates, who was born in Phoenix, Arizona, in 1944, had lofty aspirations and a keen interest in the globe. He started dating an older man who was a real estate mogul after graduating from high school. Coates first experienced the opportunities and lifestyle that came with living close to Hollywood when he moved to California as a result of this relationship. Coates was a young man establishing himself in Los Angeles by the summer of 1967. He worked part-time at a seashore hamburger stand and a petrol station while attending UCLA to take anthropological classes. Additionally, he was able to secure modest acting roles with MGM, none of which helped him become well-known. When he wasn't working, he took advantage of the Southern California lifestyle by traveling to surf in his 1947 Mercury Woody station wagon or driving a red Corvette convertible. Coates had admired Rock Hudson even before they met. He had been impressed, like many others, by Hudson's performance in the 1956 movie Giant. In 1967, I had the opportunity to meet him in person. Their first bond was amicable but quickly grew into something more. Over the following few years, Hudson and Coates grew closer as Coates became a familiar fixture in his life. After graduating from college in 1971, Coates and Hudson lived together full-time at Hudson's mansion in Beverly Hills, which his friends call the Castle. The house was a 3.5-acre estate built in the Spanish style. It was elegant, roomy, and private, reflecting Hudson's own tastes, which he had spent 2 decades perfecting. A greenhouse containing orchids, which Hudson enjoyed tending to, was one of its attractions. The relationship between Hudson and Coates was not the only aspect of life at the castle. Hudson's group of friends, co-workers, and others frequently occupied the house. According to Coates, this social setting was similar to a game of chess, with each person having a certain role in Hudson's life. He saw himself as the knight, able to maneuver toward the center when necessary, and Hudson as the monarch. However, he also observed that the environment might be political and competitive. People in Hudson's immediate vicinity frequently made an effort to gain his favor or keep their position inside his tight circle. Coates enjoyed spending time with Hudson, but he also started to worry about what other people thought of him. Being near a well-known movie actor attracted attention, but a lot of it was due to Hudson's not Coates' accomplishments but rather to his popularity. Later on, he acknowledged that he didn't appreciate being referred to as Rock Hudson's wife, which implied that his spouse was the only reason he was significant. Coates desired to be seen as a person with his own identity and goals, rather than merely a piece of someone else's life. Over time, this tension increased, and by the end of 1971, Coates made the decision to quit. He informed Hudson in December of that year that he intended to return to Arizona to complete his doctorate work in anthropology. The occasion was upsetting for Coates, but Hudson handled the news calmly. Knowing that he was closing a major chapter in his life, he departed in tears. Several years after their split, in 1976, Coates took Hudson backstage at a theater show to meet novelist Armistead Maupin. Following the actor's AIDS diagnosis in the 1980s, Maupin would go on to become one of the first individuals to openly embrace Hudson's sexual orientation. Even though it was informal at the time, this introduction was a part of the series of events that eventually influenced how the world perceived Hudson's personal life. Nader, George. Actor George Nader's career started in the early 1950s and soon showed promise. Nader, who was born in Pasadena, California, on October 19, 1921, worked consistently in television and movies during the decade when the majority of an actor's life was still governed by Hollywood's studio system. His attractiveness, commanding presence on film, and openness to playing a variety of parts made him stand out. He gained recognition for his roles in movies like Robot Monster and Four Guns to the Border, and in 1954 he was awarded the Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. It appeared as though he was headed for stardom. Nader made a personal decision that distinguished him from many of his classmates. He refused to pretend to be heterosexual in order to appease the public or studios. This choice was dangerous in the 1950s. Studio executives frequently demanded that their male stars be pictured with women, go on glitzy dates at public events, or even get married or have brief romances that would be publicized. At the time, it was thought that prominent men's marketability depended on maintaining the appearance that they were heterosexual. However, Nader did not take part in this kind of agreement. He met Mark Miller in 1947 and they were together for a long time. Without the manufactured public romances that other actors relied on to keep the rumors at bay, the two quietly developed a life together. Although it was kept out of the media, their connection was well known to friends and reliable co-workers. With Rock Hudson, Nader and Miller joined what some have called a chosen family over the years. Based on their common experience of being gay men during a period when being open could ruin a career, the three men had a strong bond of trust and understanding. They frequently took group vacations, helped one another out at work, and celebrated holidays together. In 1955, Nader committed one of his most important acts of commitment to Hudson. Confidential magazine was planning to run an article regarding Hudson's sexual orientation that year. Hudson's career could have been abruptly destroyed by this disclosure. In order to safeguard his client, Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, attempted to negotiate with the magazine. Nader was used as a decoy as part of the plan. Instead of Hudson, a different article that connected Nader to gossip was supposed to be published by Confidential. Nader helped deflect Hudson's attention by focusing it on himself. But this action had a price. Nader's career started to stall while Hudson's kept getting better. He received fewer offers for big-budget movie parts, and the rumors damaged his reputation. However, everybody involved recognized that Nader had voluntarily taken this danger in order to keep his companion safe. In order to have greater privacy in the years that followed, Nader, Miller, and Hudson frequently spent time together in Palm Springs, California. Elizabeth Taylor and other close friends attended the private parties at their houses. One of Hudson's best pals, Taylor, had pleasant memories of these occasions. She went on to say that the group was a little circle that allowed them to unwind without worrying about being discovered, a sort of safe haven. After suffering an eye ailment in the 1970s that left him vulnerable to intense lighting on set, Nader eventually turned away from performing. At a time when LGBTQ themes were uncommon in popular literature, particularly in genre fiction, he started writing and released Chrome, a science fiction book that was notable for its positive portrayal of a same-sex relationship, in 1978. For Nader, Chrome was a daring and intimate project. It demonstrated his wish to investigate love and identity-related topics free from the limitations Hollywood had imposed on him. Miller and Nader were listed as beneficiaries of Rock Hudson's bequest when he passed away in 1985. The interest from Hudson's $27 million fortune was passed down to them. A farewell gesture that demonstrated their significance in his life. There was more to the inheritance than money. It demonstrated Hudson's love and trust for the pair. Fake dates in Hollywood. Rock Hudson was frequently spotted in public with glitzy women during his career. These partnerships appeared romantic to the general public. In actuality, many were a part of a deliberate plan to shield Hudson's personal life from scrutiny during a time when coming out as gay would have ruined his career. Since the 1940s, Marilyn Maxwell has been a well-known singer and actress, having performed for U.S. troops with the USO and starring in movies including Champion and The Lemon Drop Kid. She was gorgeous, blonde, and at ease in the limelight. She was a member of the Hollywood social scene alongside Hudson by the 1950s. Hudson was ideally suited to Maxwell's public appearances. She was smart, attractive, and well-versed in media relations. They posed for pictures, went to events together, and were sometimes reported as a potential coupling in gossip columns. The tabloids refrained from delving too deeply into Hudson's personal life because of their public persona as a nice and attractive couple. Maxwell was aware of the game's regulations. Without disclosing anything private, she could engage reporters in light-hearted banter long enough to maintain their interest. Hudson and Maxwell have a close personal bond off-camera. She was one of the few people who truly knew the circumstances surrounding him, and they had mutual trust. Following Maxwell's unexpected death from a heart attack in 1972, this connection became even more evident. In order to assist her infant son Matthew, Hudson stepped in. In order to ensure that the boy was taken care of and that Maxwell's family received the support they required during a trying time, he took on the role of a father figure. Together, Doris Day and Rock Hudson produced some of the most iconic romantic comedies in Hollywood history. They were one of the most adored film couples of the time because of their on-screen connection. Both on and off the set, audiences loved the thought of them together. Their bond was, in fact, completely platonic. Day was Hudson's perfect companion in public since she respected privacy and shunned rumors. She was careful to shield their friendship from tabloid conjecture and never gave in to rumors. The two frequently socialized together, and Hudson's reputation as a leading man was further strengthened by Day's pure, American image. Day remained faithful even after Hudson was ill decades later. In 1985, she promised to personally care for him at her house once his AIDS diagnosis was made public. She wished to protect him from the brutality and terror he experienced in the spotlight. Hudson greatly appreciated her assistance over those last few months, and her offer demonstrated the depth of their friendship. In 1955, Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor met on the set of Giant. They bonded right away in a way that was considerably more than the typical co-star connection. Taylor was bold, glitzy, and fiercely devoted to her pals. She was also one of the few Hollywood people who didn't judge Hudson's sexual orientation right away. Despite marriages, changes in careers, and the altering political landscape in Hollywood, their friendship endured for decades. He was always surrounded by Taylor, and the two frequently spent time together at private events, charity functions, and parties. She was aware of the difficulties Hudson experienced in concealing his private life because her own life had been the focus of great public scrutiny. Mark Christian. Mark Christian, born Mark Christian McInnes, entered Rock Hudson's existence in 1983. Christian was in his early 30s, a long time younger than Hudson, who became drawing near 60 at the time. The age difference intended they were at very exceptional tiers in life and career. Hudson turned into a Hollywood legend whose film and TV work had made him one of the maximum recognizable faces inside the international. Christian, however, became a younger man nevertheless identifying his very own direction, working in modeling and smaller entertainment tasks. In spite of the generational hole, the two shaped a near and devoted courting. They met via mutual buddies-in-law, and their connection grew speedy. Hudson, known for being warm and beneficent in private, welcomed Christian into his Beverly Hills domestic. The couple lived collectively in relative quiet. While Hudson nevertheless labored from time to time, along with his function on the television collection Dynasty, his awareness had shifted away from the acute tempo of earlier a long time. Lifestyles with Christian often revolved around non-public dinners, time at home, and journeys to quieter retreats where they may keep away from the regular gaze of Hollywood. Close pals of Hudson observed that he regarded greater comfortable and satisfied during this time, enjoying the companionship and balance Christian delivered. But in mid-1984, their international modified. Hudson became diagnosed with AIDS at a time while the sickness changed into poorly understood and closely stigmatized. Remedies had been constrained and public expertise was clouded by way of fear and incorrect information. Hudson selected to keep his diagnosis a secret, even from a lot of those closest to him. Christian later stated that Hudson did not inform him approximately the prognosis right now. In his Money Ode, Christian Most Effective found out the reality much later after the illness had stepped forward. By way of then, Hudson had already began to experience the visible consequences of the sickness, weight loss, fatigue, and a decline in energy. However, in public, Hudson attempted to keep his standard presence, performing at activities and persevering with to work. On July 25, 198, Hudson's publicist made a declaration that bowled over the arena. Rock Hudson had AIDS. The announcement made headlines around the world and turned into a turning point in public attention of the ailment. Hudson became one of the first principal celebrities to be recognized publicly, and his fame brought remarkable interest to the AIDS disaster. For Christian, the assertion changed into both a private and public shock. Abruptly, their private struggle changed into a worldwide information story. Hudson died on October 2, 1985 on the age of 59. In the months that observed, Christian filed a lawsuit in opposition to Hudson's property. He claimed that Hudson had knowingly withheld his AIDS diagnosis even as persevering with their intimate relationship, which he argued placed his fitness at severe danger. The case became groundbreaking as it was one of the uncommon times on the time where an equal intercourse associate sought prison recognition and repayment in court docket. The legal complaints attracted good-sized media interest. Christian testified about their lifestyles together, describing Hudson's warm temperature and the love they shared, but additionally the secrecy and fear that surrounded his infection. He argued that he had the right to realize approximately Hudson's diagnosis and that withholding it turned into a contravention of accept as true with. In 1987, the case became settled. Christian was provided a sum reportedly within the variety of numerous million greenbacks. Although the precise determined became in no way showed publicly, the settlement was enormous, no longer simplest for Christian but additionally as a second of criminal recognition that identical sex partners could have rights in conditions related to health and private protection. Christian himself in large part stepped far away from the highlight after the agreement. He every so often gave interviews to documentarians and reporters, specifically when projects approximately Hudson's lifestyles had been in production. Via his words, he preserved a very last chapter of Hudson's non-public tale, one marked through love, secrecy, and the heavy fee of reputation in a time of worry. If you found this video exciting, bear in mind to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you do not miss the subsequent one on Hollywood's hidden tales.